All right, we're going to get into the second part of political parties now, which is actually it's going to be kind of a little bit of a mixture of some of the different chapters in your book. We will be looking at chapter 7. We'll get back into a little bit of a chapter 5 and chapter 6, and then we're also going to get into chapter 8, which is primarily what we're going to be looking at when it comes to campaigning and actually what do political parties mostly do, which is get candidates to run for political office. So that's what we're going to be looking at here is the whole procedure and the way that this whole thing takes place. To do that, what we're going to focus on is instead of doing this on congressional races or state elections or city elections or governorships, instead we're just going to look at the president because that's the one that most people always focus on is the presidential elections, even though it's the one that has pretty much the least really amount of meaning when it comes to how it affects your life. So let's say that it's 50 years down the road, 40 years down the road, and you have been very successful in your life. You've done a lot of great things. You made a lot of money, and you made a great name for yourself. And all of a sudden, you get a call by XYZ party, and they're like, "Hey, would you mind running for president of the United States for us?" Well, even though that sounds far-fetched, it could happen. Barack Obama, probably when the guy was, living with his mom and his stepdad and growing up in Kansas and in Hawaii and stuff, in Kansas with his grandparents, I'm sure he didn't think about, running for president of the United States, but it's something that, it happens, and eventually down the road, we are going to need somebody. So let's just say, for example, that that's going to take place. So how does this whole thing get started? The first thing you have to do is choosing of a candidate. Well, if you're the party, you have to go out there and find somebody who is going to meet the eligibility requirements to run for president of the United States. And in the Constitution, there are three. Age, 35 years old. Citizenship must be a born U.S. citizen. And residency, meaning that the person must live here in the United States for at least 14 years during the period of time to run for president of the United States. Now, besides that, what else do parties look for? Well, primarily, most of our presidents, except for 4 of them, there were 4 presidents who did not have any political background when they ran for president. All of them were generals, and that would be starting out with Washington, and then you would go into, there was Eisenhower, and then there was Zachary Taylor during that time. But most of all of our other presidents did have some kind of political background, either governor, senator, those kinds of things. So that is not an essential thing. It's not a must-have thing, but it is something that most our presidents are. Third part that parties look at is character. And again, they want to make sure that they don't look for someone to run who has a lot of skeletons in their closet, that has scandals, that has things that's going to come up in the press, that's going to cause that person to look horribly bad, and that's going to make the party look bad. So the party is going to make sure that you have a strong, good character. Fourth is your past experience. What kind of business sense do you have? Did you run a business? Were you in charge of a business? Maybe you were a lawyer. Maybe you had whatever other profession you had before you went into politics. That's going to be also important for your ability to run for president of the United States. Although, again, there's no requirements on any of this. And then the last thing is name recognition, which comes under broad support. And the more name recognition you have, the greater support you're going to have, which means then, of course, the greater chance you're going to have of winning. The 3 keys to winning an election, if you would decide to run, or if, let's say down the road that you're working for a party that's trying to find somebody, is one is a political affiliation with the party itself. We haven't had a president from the Independent Party. We haven't had a president from the Reform Party or from the Libertarian Party or the Progressive. Basically, it's going to be Republican or Democrat. Now, down the road, when you guys get to be older, who knows? Where our political system is going to go. But for right now, that's kind of how it's set up. The second big thing that comes into the key to an election is how is the economy doing? If you are the incumbent party, that means the party that's in power right now, and the economy is doing really poorly, your chances of winning is probably going to be a lot less. If you are the incumbent, the party that is already in power, and the economy is doing well, your chances for winning are much, much greater. That's kind of how people vote, is based upon their pocketbook. If they're doing well, if I have a job and if I'm making pretty good income and things aren't getting too high in prices and it doesn't look like the economy's falling apart, I'm probably going to vote for the people that's in office already because they haven't done a bad job, is what the mindset is. If on the other side the economy is horrible, terrible, unemployment, everything else, I'm going to kick those people out and put new ones in. Whether they're good or bad doesn't matter. It's all about the money in the pocketbook. The third key to the election then is the character of the candidate. So again, when a party's looking for a candidate, those key things are going to be vitally important to make sure that they can find that. Okay, then after a party finds a candidate, now comes the big thing, financial support. To run for president of the United States in 2012, it would have cost $2.5 billion in total spending. Now that's total spending by all of the candidates who ran. Now remember, in 2012, this was with Barack Obama, running against Mitt Romney. So the combination of those two guys, those two gentlemen running for the presidency in 2012, along with the running of all of Congress, of the House of Representatives, because all 435 members run, and of 33 senators running, the combination of all that, $2.5 billion. That is just it's a mind-boggling sum to think about how much is getting spent on political campaigns now. So if you're a candidate, all you're doing is fundraising all the time. And of course, if you're out there fundraising and people are giving you money, they're not giving it for free. They want something in return. So all of these politicians, from the president on down to the city mayor, who goes out there and has to get financial support in order for them to win their reelection, is being bought by people, groups, interest groups, corporations, other groups, in order for them to give their vote. And that's kind of how things have turned out in this society with how our election system is. So money is the mother's milk of politics. Basically, that is the whole idea. Is, again, if you're an infant, a baby, you need your mother's milk, either from the breast or from the bottle. But the whole idea is, without that milk, the baby's not going to survive. Well, without money, politics doesn't survive. So a politician is going to not survive then. That's what that quote means. In 1860 to 1972, 29 presidential election winners outspent the loser 21 times. So there again, it's very important. Money is a driving force on this. Since 1972, the federal government took over the maximum spending of candidates until 2008. What that basically means is, in 1972, there was some laws passed in which if a candidate wanted to get federal money, tax dollar money, to run for president of the United States, they could do that. But then there was a limit on how much they could spend and how much money they could take in. If a candidate wanted to not take federal money, they could do that, and then they could spend as much money on their own what they wanted to, but they would get no federal money at all. Until 2008, every presidential candidate from 1972 to then has always taken federal money. 2008 was the first time a presidential candidate did not take federal money to run for president of the United States, and that was Barack Obama. Gary C. Jacobson did a study on spending and voting, and basically what he found is that if you are an incumbent, someone who's already won once, and you're running in it again for a second time, the amount of money that you spend on your campaign does not have much of an effect on your chances of winning or losing. Basically, an incumbent is going to win. They don't have to outspend their opponent. They just have to be able to make sure that the economy is doing well and that they're not going to get blamed for it, that they have good name recognition, and that they're able to show strong support in the community. If you're a challenger, you're someone that hasn't ever run before, you got to get your name out there. Spending now for you is much, much more difficult and much harder to do. So you do have to outspend your opponent because you got to get your name recognition out there much harder. Now, if the economy is really poor, then the challenger actually has an advantage there, but they're still going to have to probably outspend their opponent. Okay, so where do you get your money? How do you run for president of the United States if it takes millions of dollars to run? Where the hell am I going to get all that money at? Well, there's what's called the private and public sources of money. We're going to go to the website there, Open Secrets, tomorrow in class. But basically where you get it from, first, small contributors. Okay, this is the people that you send out in your district. You send letters out. Okay, if you're going to run for president of the United States, you will send out all these flyers and letters to people saying, hey, I'm running for president of the United States. If you give me $5 or $10, anything you can give me would be great. So that's one way you make your money, is by people just giving you small donations. Now, small donations usually go up to in the neighborhood of $1,000. That's considered still a small donation. Anything from $1,000 on down, and that's kind of moving a little bit now because of inflation and everything else. So it's kind of moving up a little bit in terms of the dollar figure, but it's still about that much money. Those are called small contributors. Okay. The second place I'm going to go get my money from is those wealthy supporters. Okay. The mega rich, the super wealthy. I'm going to go and I'm going to talk to them and I'm going to go to their houses and I'm going to do all this and I'm going to try to gain and I'm going to try to get as much money from them as I can. Now, there are laws out there that does put limitations on how much money I can get from these people. I can't just get whatever they want to give me. Okay. There is a maximum amount. For contributors, individuals here, okay, small or wealthy, doesn't matter, individual contributors, they are limited to $2,500 now. $2,500 is the maximum that they can give per candidate per race. So if I run in a primary, which we'll talk a little bit more about in class, but if I run in a primary race against another opponent from the same party, I can get $2,500. Then when I win that and I run in the general election against another person from a different party, I can get another $2,500. But there is a limit on how much individuals can give. How much can I give myself? How much of my money can I spend? Whatever I want. If I want to spend millions of dollars, I can do that. If I'm Mr. Mega Wealthy, I can do that as much as I want. Where else can I get money? This is the public source side now. So all of this here was private source. Now this is the public source. Where else I can go is I can go to PACs. Now PAC stands for Political Action Committees. These are groups of people who get together to they support an idea, they support an issue, they support some kind of an initiative, and they want candidates who's going to support their issue to get it passed. So if I'm running, what's going to happen is these PACs are going to call me up and say, hey, we want to interview you and find out whether or not you're a good candidate for us. So they'll call me in, and basically what they'll do to you then is they will ask you questions about that relates to their issues, their things they want passed, and if you answer the right questions, they can give you money. Now they are limited as well. They are limited to $5,000 is all they can give per candidate per election. Now, here comes the big ones. One is called the temporary fundraising organizations, and we're going to talk a little bit more about these down in class tomorrow and down the road. Okay, and then the last one is government. Okay, the federal government, remember I talked about this, they can also give you money. Here's the stipulations on the federal government side, though. In order for you to get government money, first you must go raise $100,000 on your own. How you do that is you must raise that money in 25 states. So you got to raise $100,000, not $100,000 in each 25 states, $100,000 total, but you got to get that money throughout 25 different states. You can only account, as part of that $100,000, you can only count contributions of $250 or less. So now we're coming back here to all those small contributors. So if a wealthy contributor gives you $10,000, great, hey, that's super, but you can't count it towards this $100,000. Okay, only time this gets counted is when it's the $250 or less contributions from the small. In order for a minority candidate to get federal money, in the previous election for president, that party would have had to have won 15% of the vote. So, in other words, if there was, let's say, the Libertarian Party, okay, they didn't get 15% of the vote in the last election, and they want to run a candidate again in this next election in 2016, they would not be able to get any government money because their candidate in 2012 did not get 15% of the vote. The only candidates in the last umpteen years of elections and presidential elections that's ever got 15% of the vote was basically a Republican or Democrat. Now, there was one exception there. There was a guy named Ross Perot back in 1990s who ran for the Reform Party, and he did get 19% of the vote. So his party did actually receive government subsidies the next time go around, but there was nobody for their party to run. So it was kind of a waste thing. Okay, at this, we're going to end the first presentation then, and we will get back into class and go over some of this stuff and review over it. But hopefully you got down the information, plus you took down some other additional information from me explaining it to you on some of the rules, because that's very important. Those numbers are going to be really important for your test. So if you didn't get that, you may need to go back and rewatch the video and listen to it again in order to get it.